Well, before I start, well, thank you very much, Justin, for that and the introduction and for the opportunity to do this for your group. And I just wanted to make a note that I don't think I told you. I spent many wonderful summers up on Lake Seymour in the Northeast Kingdom as a child, as a camper and a camp counselor, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. So nice. I'm very, very familiar with Vermont, all over Vermont. So I'm very happy to be helpful to the group, and I'm available for questions after and email after too. So there will be there'll be lots of ways to get hold of me if you need to ask more questions.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh. Go ahead.
Okay. The tool, this is a tool that is on our website. And so after today, you can go find it on our website. There will be, I'll give you the link to it. It's something you can print out as a hard copy document. And I'm going to run through the way it's used so you can see that. If you are able to go to the CNT Center for Neighborhood Technology website, I'll sort of direct you there a little bit. CNT is located in Chicago, and it's been around since 1978. And we like to call ourselves a think and do tank. And we focus on urban sustainability issues, and more specifically, focused on transportation and energy and water resources, which is the area we're in today, and the area that I work in. And climate change is something that pervades all of those three. So if you, again, go to our website, you'll notice, I guess I better say something here. I'll just do it that way. You'll notice that you can navigate through our website into these different areas if you're interested. But the water, up on the top right-hand side of our website, is the place where you can click on water and find this document and others that we work on. Among the things that we do in our water group are the development of tools like the one we're going to talk about today. I, being a recovering lawyer, as Justin said, I'm the policy guy, so I work on legislation and regulation changes and in Chicago and Illinois and all around the country. So those are some things you want to talk about. We can do that. Education programs and demonstration projects with green infrastructure, and also we've developed networks on the internet that are communities of practice where people can talk to each other about green infrastructure and other water issues. So stepping back in history a little bit, I don't know how to make that thing go away. We developed about a decade ago a tool called the Green Values Calculator. Some of you may have seen it, used it. It is on a website, and there's the link to that. And the goal of the calculator is to allow anyone to imagine a hypothetical development site, choose, as you can see on this page here, this is a piece of a page of the website, maybe your locality, maybe there's an ordinance that you'd like to apply. You want to choose a runoff reduction goal, so there's a tab for that. And then if you are to click on the green improvements that you could make at that hypothetical site, you'll get a page that looks like this, and one can click the boxes here, and they open up and provide more information requirements. For example, if you clicked on green roof, it would say how many square feet. So Justin, I apologize. Do you see what I'm seeing? There's a box that keeps coming up for asking me to change the color scheme here. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to get that to go away.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that. I don't know who's. No, that's not what I meant to do. Let's go back to that. Okay. So as I was saying, we use this box to click on various kinds of green infrastructure, and then the calculator will calculate the hydrologic impacts, the life cycle costs, and in some cases it'll calculate the monetary benefit to that. And the page that shows that looks like this at the bottom. And as I say, this is a fairly it's an aging tool, and we have not updated it because we don't have a grant to do that. So the data is back to around the 2006 timeframe. But in thinking about this particular idea of providing the benefits, the idea was bouncing around in our heads, but didn't really get solidified for a while. And we finally, in talking to municipal folks about putting in green infrastructure, trying to identify the barriers to green infrastructure, we realized that what was happening when we talked about the alternatives between green and gray was that they were always comparing the cost of putting in regular pavement to, comparing that to porous pavement, or putting in a bioswale as compared to just putting in your standard curb and gutter. And oftentimes, or most of the time perhaps, there was some additional costs associated with the green infrastructure. And if you didn't do any other calculation, you might say to yourself, well, okay, if this is always going to cost me more and I don't have any more money, then I'm going to choose to do the conventional approach. What we weren't talking about was a comparison between the actual monetary value of the green infrastructure as compared to the conventional gray infrastructure. And so we decided that we ought to develop a tool that helped municipal folks and developers and engineers assess the value, the various values of green infrastructure in a monetary way, in a financial way. So that's really what this is all about. And this is what the cover page of the tool looks like, the hard copy. And there is the website, or the link to it. And I'll leave that there for a few seconds so you can write that down if you want to do that. And Justin, if you are going to, you can make this available. Certainly happy to give you the permission to do that on your website afterwards if that's helpful, my PowerPoint.
Sure.
So if anybody has, if I go through that too quickly, if somebody wants to get it down later, you can ask me. So using the guide now requires a two-step process. And the first one sounds really simple, but it's also really important. And it is to identify, I'm going to go back up, this is sort of a picture, it's just a little bit of an idea of the different icons represent different kinds of benefits. And in this picture there are 15, but we have, in our guide, we have 18 that are identified. So as we go through the process with the municipal folk or the person who's interested, the developer, whoever it is, the first thing we want to do is identify the different benefits and to quantify them. So if I put in so many square feet of green roof or so many trees or whatever it is, I want to make sure I have units and I can quantify the actual benefit. And also, so it's the units of the green infrastructure practice, but also the units of the benefit in terms of money. But before you get to money, it's the units of a water reduction or air pollution reduction or something like that. Those are the benefits. So that's the measurement of the benefits. And then we take the calculated benefits and we calculate what is the monetary value of that benefit. Okay. So here is sort of behind the scenes in the calculator, or in the valuation guide rather. On the left-hand side, we focused on 5 kinds of green infrastructure in those categories as you see listed on the left. In the middle, we just show the ways we measure the practice, the green infrastructure practice. So it's either square feet or percentage of coverage of a canopy or gallons of water being harvested or collected. And on the right-hand side, you begin to see sort of the names and the ideas about what are the benefits to putting in the green infrastructure. And so it can involve energy in terms of both kilowatt hours and BTUs, or pounds of pollutant removed, or gallons removed. Water quality is a benefit too. But on the next slide, I go into more detail here about each one of the categories of benefits. And now we're splitting it out even further. It gets very complicated. But part of the reason to show all this is so that you get the sense of how many different benefits there are that are provided by green infrastructure as compared to a conventional pipe and transport system in a treatment plant, where you really only have one goal in mind when you first do those things. You're going to transport water from one place to another so that it can be treated and then discharged. In the case of green infrastructure, we get that benefit, but we're also going to add to that potentially these 18 other benefits and provide monetary values for those benefits, so that if you're going to your management, your senior management, and you're making the case for putting in green infrastructure, you want to be able to argue to them that, hey, this is it. Okay, it may cost the same or more for the green, but there are all these other things that we're going to get from that that we think will make our community a more livable community, more sustainable community, and basically a cheaper community to live in overall. So just as an example, we've got the water category of benefits: the treatment, reduction in treatment costs, improvements in water quality, reduction in stream erosion, and on and on and on. That's just the water benefits. We can add to that the energy benefits, and primarily it's going to end up being a savings in money because we're going to reduce the cost of heating or cooling. We're going to reduce the energy cost of pumping water, because we're going to reduce the amount of water that needs to be pumped, and we're going to reduce the energy cost of providing treatment for water when it goes to a treatment plant or storage. Same thing. Air quality, we're going to call that out as a benefit and talk about the ways green infrastructure sequesters the pollutants or reduces the carbon emissions, and that also applies to climate change and carbon sequestration under that category. And of course, these things also will loop back and be interconnected. So the heat island effect, if we're going to reduce the heat island effect and reduce temperatures in the street dense urban area, we're going to reduce morbidity, mortality, provide more comfort, but we're also going, you can see how that feeds the energy category as well. If we're reducing the heat in an area from planting more trees, the buildings themselves will not get as warm. That will also save energy in the summer and in the wintertime. It'll save energy on heating. So there are lots of different ways these different areas interact. We've got things that are harder to measure, the benefits too. Some of our benefits don't have calculations or equations, but we want to list them here so that everybody has a sense that, wow, we really are getting more benefits, more than we can even calculate or assess. But they're all there, they're all real, and they play a role in providing sustainability and aesthetic value to our communities. In many places, we want to have increased biodiversity and ecological health, so that's a benefit for sure to having more vegetative systems, and also for all these things that are more visible to our community because they're above ground, they're going to provide a public education tool that the conventional water and stormwater, wastewater piping underground doesn't really provide because it's out of sight and out of mind. Okay, so here is the central chart that is useful to think about. And across this, down on the left-hand side, we've got the 5 categories of green infrastructure practices: green roofs, trees, bioswales, permeable pavement, and water collection for reuse. And across the top, there are 18 different benefits that we've identified. And if you sort of take a look at the icons, you're going to recognize them. I'm going to use them later. We're going to focus on the water, some of the water areas of benefits, reduction in gray infrastructure needs through the reduction in water and the use of green infrastructure, the reduction in treatment here. We're going to talk about energy. We're going to talk about air quality, greenhouse gas emissions. We've already talked about the heat island effect, and these are more of the some of these are less able to be calculated, but these are the aesthetic values, some of them. And so these are, again, across the top, 18 different benefits. So that means that if there were ways to provide benefits or demonstrate benefits for all of them, there would be 90 different boxes that were filled here, but they aren't all filled because they don't all relate. Green roofs are probably not going to help your de-icing, so that's why that box is empty. But there are a lot of boxes that are full, so there are many different ways that each of these green infrastructure practices can provide benefits. Now, to give you an example of how the tool works, I'm going to pick one box in all of this chart, and it's going to be the energy box, and I'm going to choose to describe how you use the valuation guide for a hypothetical green roof. Again, 1 out of 90 different squares. You can do this for many of the squares, but we're just going to talk about one right now because it's complicated, and you'll see what I mean. So here we are with a hypothetical green roof, and we're going to talk about the energy benefits from a 5,000 square foot green roof. And that, again, we're going to focus in on the energy benefit, which has two components. Summer and winter, basically, you're going to have probably a BTU demand for heating a building in the wintertime and a kilowatt-hour air conditioning demand in the summertime, but we're going to just focus on the BTU aspect, so we're only going to look at half of the equation here, or half of the issue. And I put the picture of the cutaway of the green roof here so that you can immediately see where we're going to go with this. You know, a green roof is not just something that absorbs water, but it actually is a thickness to it that provides an insulating value, an R value, or a thermal resistance value. And the thicker the roof is, the green part of it is, the more insulating value it has. So that's where the equation comes from for determining the monetary value of a green roof. So and this isn't something that CNT created. This has been researched and worked through in other published articles around the world, and we're just borrowing it and putting it all here in one place in the valuation guide. But the calculation that was put together here involves using the heating degree days of your locality, the green roof area, in this case the 5,000 square feet, other elements or factors in the mathematical equation, and in particular we want to focus on the difference here, and I'll explain what this is. It's going to be the difference between the conventional green roof, the conventional roof without the green roof, and the conventional roof with the green roof added. And so, multiplying all those factors together, we're going to come up with the measurement of the actual benefit of adding a green roof, this particular green roof, and that's going to be in BTUs per square foot in reduced energy usage. Okay, hopefully you're all with me so far. So just to explain a little bit further what that difference is in mathematical terms, it's the U is the R value of the green roof itself. I'm sorry, the U is the coefficient, and R is the actual measurement of the resistance. And the D is just the difference between the conventional green roof, or CR, and the green roof, the GR in that equation. So this becomes the equation for, or that particular factor, mathematical factor. And I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that, but we're going to get the number crunchers out and take that and put it into our equation, and we are going to see that in Chicago we've got a certain number of degree days, and those other factors all multiplied together with the 5,000 square foot green roof, and that gives us a per square foot BTU value of 7,231 BTUs for the addition of that sort of average green roof. And so that's the starting point right there. But that's, again, square footage. That's per square foot. So we're going to multiply the value per square foot, and we're going to multiply it by our 5,000 square feet. And on an annual basis then, we have a differential in BTU exchange from inside the building to outside the building of 36 million BTUs. So that's the energy benefit of that green roof, at least in the wintertime when we're trying to heat the building and we have this additional insulating value. So, but then that's not the end of the story, because we need to know what that means in terms of money. And this is the easiest part, because all we need to do is find out what the dollar value of a BTU is in the Chicago area and plug that into our equation, or just multiply it by our energy savings, and we get an annual savings of $445 more or less for that hypothetical green roof. Okay, pretty simple. But then we need to go further and talk about, so what does that mean for us in my city, my municipality, if I want to put on many green roofs? I don't want to stop at 5,000 square feet. This is an example in Chicago of one of the, you've probably all seen this picture before. This is a pretty iconic photograph now of the roof of City Hall in Chicago with 20,000 square feet of green roof. And that represents, according to our equation, $1,800 or so in annual savings every year since the year 2000 when they built it. And then just to add more scaling up to that, several years ago, like 5 years ago when I first started working at CNT, we were told that the city had already built about 2 million square feet of green roof. Through its policies, it has a green roof credit policy, or it did, that encouraged people to build green roofs, and that represented a savings to the building owners on an annual basis of over $178 or almost $178,000. So the building owners made the investment, and the building owners are going to get the benefit of doing that. And that's a pretty large number when year after year after year. It's pretty cool. And then another step in further down the line is, well, that we didn't stop at 2 million square feet. What I was told even just a year ago was that we were headed towards permitting or being completed 7 million square feet of green roof in Chicago, in the city, and that shows you just another scaling up. As those things get completed, we're going to get closer to $623,000 a year accruing to the building owners. So that, and again, this is just the green roof and just the energy, the winter energy benefit from having a green roof program. Many other benefits will come from a green roof, and I just can't even take the time to do that, but this is just to show you one little aspect of that. So to talk about another one that might be of interest to you, and it certainly is here in Chicago, something we don't have an equation for in the valuation guide, but it has to do with flood damage in buildings. And I bring it up because the numbers are much bigger than the even in an estimated format, because we don't have an equation. But we want to get to an equation in this. It may not be that easy, but just to show you the magnitude, the order of magnitude of other kinds of benefits that can accrue from green infrastructure. If we talk about reducing flood damage by putting in green infrastructure, we want to first quantify the kinds of things that are, or I'm sorry, the kind of the problem, the size of the problem. In this case, we don't have a well, the units for the benefit are really dollars in damages, because people's homes get flooded and they have to pay for replacing the damage, or replacing the walls, replacing the damaged property, and things like that. So we took this example of the year 2010, and in the first 10 months of the year, we discovered through some little bit of research that the city said over 15,000 calls came in to their 311 number. And those were people all complaining about basement flooding. And they were asking for help. But of course, one thing we have to note here is sort of an assumption we're making, is that the people who call 311 are only a fraction of the people whose basements actually flooded. So if 15,000 is the number of calls made, you can only imagine, two or three times that perhaps, or even more, the number of people who actually were flooded. But let's just stick with 15,000 complaints, and the kind of things that they were calling about were this kind of thing: the floods in their basement, loss of personal property, loss of time to deal with the problem, the cost of replacing the walls, and maybe some health care costs with mold and things like that. So this is a very serious problem that happens more and more with climate change. and it's a very serious problem in Chicagoland that we're spending a lot more time on here at CNT. But for now, let's just say we've got this is the problem. We're going to try to put a number on this. So we go to a local service provider that helps clean homes, and their estimate is that in the Chicago area, where these 15,000 calls came in, the number of calls that the private service industry of the sector gets every year is close to 60,000 a year, individual private home calls to go deal with. And on average, the cost of their remediation project is $2,500. And that means that every single year, if that's the average, $150 million are being spent for those services in the Chicago area every single year, based on just your average your average rainfall and your average floods. Some years are worse than others, but it's very common here. So one can only imagine that if people are paying out $150 million every year collectively across the Chicagoland area, what might they be willing to spend to invest in green infrastructure to alleviate all that cost and make some of it at least go away? Because I mean, it's got to be a lot less expensive and less of a mental problem, of stressful than having to go every year or year after year and replace things in your basement and go through the pain all the time. So that's a much bigger number than I showed you for the energy savings or the energy benefit of the green infrastructure. But this is just to give you a sense of another kind of a benefit that could be really important to people in terms of investing in green infrastructure. So again, here's our chart. Those are many different benefits. You can only go through one of them this time. Hopefully that was helpful to show you how this works. I also want to show you a case study where the Center for Neighborhood Technology was asked to put together some of these equations and show cumulatively in a slightly less hypothetical way. In Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the U.S. EPA commissioned this study, this calculation, that we were asked to be the primary consultant on. And the partners are listed there: American Rivers, Tetra Tech, City of Lancaster, of course. They have a green infrastructure plan that was put together by CH2M Hill for them. And so this group all worked together on this, but CNT was using its guide that I just talked to you about, and we went through an exercise, and there was a series of the benefits, not all of them, not all 18, but these 6 individual benefits were looked at: the water treatment costs and the reductions in those treatment costs, the reduction in gray infrastructure needs based on putting in green infrastructure, the reduction in energy use, electricity use, natural gas use, the way we talked about before, a reduction in emissions of common air pollutants, and the reduction in CO2 emissions in the context of climate change. And so those were the benefits that we looked at in the equations that apply to each one of those. And the kinds of green infrastructure practices are the same list as you saw on the chart, of course, because that's what's in the guide. And so there are then, I guess that's 6 times 5, so that's at least 30 different equations that were looked at in this particular study. And as I say, we started out with a green infrastructure plan, and it's a 25-year plan that Lancaster had already come up with. But they didn't have the details on the money. That's why they were saying, oh, so what can we add to this? What can we say about the results from putting in this green infrastructure? Well, we know one result that we're aiming at. The goal is just about 1 billion gallons of runoff that we're going to try to reduce from all the green infrastructure. Okay, so that's the hydrologic goal. They didn't have a monetary goal, but they wanted to find out if they put in enough green infrastructure to achieve that hydrologic goal, what would the monetary benefits be under using our guide? And so that was the starting point. And then we said, okay, so how do we do that? Well, we need some examples of the kinds of green infrastructure practices that you intend to put in Lancaster. And there were 20 different demonstration projects with specifications, which we got from them. Different kinds of excavations with porous pavement and how deep and how much rock and what are the anticipated the sizes and shapes and the amount of water being reduced in them. And we then created a mix of those kinds of projects to handle or to achieve the billion-gallon goal, and applied the equations to them and came up with a total that is an annual monetary benefit. So the numbers that I'm going to show you are the estimated annual benefits, but they are going to be the number that is going to accrue at the point when 25 years have gone by already, and all of the green infrastructure has been put in place to achieve the billion-gallon goal. Okay, so there'll just be kind of like one number, and of course between now and the 25 years, there'll be lots of benefits that accrue in terms of both hydrology and dollars, but we're not even including them here. We're talking about the annual number as it will exist after 25 years of putting in green infrastructure, assuming that they meet this the billion-gallon goal. So hopefully that's clear. And now what I'm going to do is go through some examples of, at least in words, narrative, how this was done. And as you remember, we first identified the benefits, which in the water area, the water category, we have two benefits that we looked at: the avoided cost of wastewater treatment and the avoided cost of putting in gray infrastructure either at all or of a larger size. If we avoid a larger size, then we're going to save money as well. So we identified that, and then we identified the kinds of green infrastructure practices that would be used to achieve those reductions for those avoided costs. That's that list. And then running the calculations, we determined that, as I say, in the mix of green infrastructure practices that we chose, over 25 years, at the end of the 25 years, there would be enough green infrastructure to meet the billion gallons. And on the water side, just the benefits, those two benefits added together, the wastewater treatment and the gray infrastructure avoidance, $122 billion per year would be the benefit. Okay? Per year. Starting, and as I say, before that, there would be benefits, but this is what it would be starting on year 25, day 1 after that. Switching to the energy category, you heard me talk about that. But in this case, so we're going to combine, we're going to talk about electricity use savings and natural gas use savings, but we're going to combine the benefits from green roofs and tree planting and water harvesting and insulation, or those three things: tree planting, harvesting, and green roofs. And those are underneath. That's just the kinds of the effects that those practices have. And the resulting number is over 2 billion gallons. I'm sorry, $2 million a year from those practices in the energy category. So we would add that to the dollars in the benefit in the water category. Okay, next category is air quality. And what we were looking at was the reduced emissions of nitrogen oxides, ozone, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter. And so the benefits, or the green infrastructure practices, are things you might imagine mostly vegetative, but also things you might not think about. Permeable pavement is actually going to help because it's going to, indirectly, it's going to reduce the use of water. It's going to reduce the energy emissions as a result of that, having less water in the system. And so there are many indirect and related benefits from different kinds of green infrastructure, even in the air quality category. And so ultimately, running the numbers on the air quality side, we came up with over $1 million a year in benefits from the the reduction in emissions of, of those air pollutants. And then finally, specific numbers could be calculated for climate change because there are equations for the benefits of reducing CO2 and the climate, overall climate change benefits. All kinds of vegetation are going to be the approach here. Reducing atmospheric CO2, of course, carbon sequestration, all those other things we talked about before, all related. And finally, the estimate there is $786,000 a year when all the green infrastructure has been implemented. And then one step beyond that, which isn't going to have a number associated with it, but we looked at even other benefits that are out there, but we don't have equations for them. But those icons up there are heat island effect and noise and recreational value, habitat, public education, community cohesion. All those things are benefits to the community. They increase property value. All of them do with green infrastructure, and that's something that's it's very hard to measure. We didn't make an attempt to measure that here, so we're just noting them, that there are further benefits that are not being calculated. And again, it's perhaps part of your tool or part of your argument when you're looking to senior management to give you support for a green infrastructure program, to mention all of these things so that they can see that this equates to a happy community, happy voters, happy people who want to support with their taxes and with their time and with their votes these kinds of activities. And this is one of the main things I think that this could be useful for, because it puts it all in perspective. And here's just sort of a final tally sheet for the numbers that we did calculate. You can see at the bottom there that adding all those calculations together, you get $126 million per year of benefits for the complete implementation of their green infrastructure plan in Lancaster. And this can be done. We could have done a different mix of green infrastructure practices. We could have chosen a different goal, but this is what this particular exercise came up with, and it seems to be, at least as an order of magnitude, a very effective way to show how valuable green infrastructure is beyond its value as a way to get water out of the system. And I think that's it. So I'd be happy to take any questions that you have now.
Great. I did see a couple questions come in. So Danny, do you want to run through those?
Sure. There's two related to costs. One is, what was the annual maintenance cost for the green roof in Chicago versus the annual energy savings?
Okay, good question. I believe that life cycle costs were included somewhere, but I am going to write that down, and I will have to get back to you because I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. And then the other one is similar but it's not specific to that example. Is how does the installation and maintenance cost compare to the dollar benefit of GI?
Right. So it's, yeah, sort of similar question.
Is this accounting for how costs are included in the model?
Right, right. Well, I think my guess is that the costs are not included at all because, as I said at the very beginning, what is usually done is someone does a life cycle analysis of the costs, both capital and O&M, annual costs, following that for whatever the lifespan of the facility is. And those are the numbers that are usually compared with not doing it or using the conventional approach. The valuation guide's objective and the equations were not intended to calculate cost. So rather than say I don't know the answer, I'm going to say I do know the answer. And the answer is none of that was included in here because the objective here is to show the financial or the monetary benefits of putting in all that green infrastructure somewhere else. Someone has calculated or can calculate the cost in your particular area of a 5,000 square foot green roof, capital-wise and O&M-wise. So that's not included at all, and that's something that should be included in the discussion. But that's not the goal of this particular tool.
Okay. There was another question about the green roofs in Chicago, and when you're inputting information up front for the green roof, do you just need the square footage of the roof, or is there any other inputs that are needed?
The other input that you can put in, if you have it, is a number for the average R value of a green roof. In the evaluation guide, there is a number that's, I believe it's probably nationwide average of basically the thickness of a green roof and therefore the R value of the green roof. But if we go back to that equation at the very beginning, we'll see that we're going to talk about, let's see if I can just go there quickly. Okay, so we're talking about these parameters in the heating degree days of the locality where you are, the square footage of the roof, of your hypothetical roof, and then the only other factor in the equation is this number, and that will vary according to your green roof. This number will vary according to your green roof, and I think that there is the default value is in the evaluation guide. But surely, if you want to be more accurate, you could come up with another number for your locality. But again, even in a locality, there are going to be all kinds of green roofs. So you might be hard pressed to find a really accurate number for that, other than an average of all kinds of green roofs.
Okay. Another question that has come in is about EPA's tool called Sustain. Can you comment on the similarities or differences between the two models?
I am not a modeler or familiar with models in terms of what they do, except to say that this is not really a model because it's not a computer-generated set of numbers. It's a projection of a hypothetical, which is similar to what a model does, but it is not calculating how many, well, I guess it does calculate how many gallons would be the hydrologic impact. I would say that it's not really intended to be a model so much as a set of equations that have to be worked through on an individual basis in a locality, and I am not familiar with Sustain enough to say that I know that I can compare those two, so I apologize for that.
Oh, no worries. Another question that has come in is looking at the reduced savings between wastewater treatment and the cost of gray infrastructure. Can you say which one typically comes in at a greater savings?
I repeat that, but I think the answer is I can't tell you.
Okay. I'll read it exactly.
Yeah,
in running these scenarios on value, do you typically find that the largest savings are in avoided cost of wastewater treatment and avoided cost of gray infrastructure?
Oh, what is the bigger number?
I guess I read it wrong first.
What between those two, what's the bigger savings?
Well, I was like, do you typically find the largest savings are in wastewater and avoided?
Because that was
the
our
biggest cost
number
savings.
In the Lancaster example, it was the biggest number by far. So I would say that I would be guessing. This hasn't been done very much. But just based on the orders of magnitude of those numbers that were shown there, some of that is going to differ based on the mix of green infrastructure practices that you choose. So, for example, in the Lancaster situation, what was done was to assume a certain, when we started at the beginning with the billion-gallon goal, we had to decide on a mix of green infrastructure practices. So what percentage of the green infrastructure was going to be green roofs? What percentage was going to be tree planting? What percentage was going to be porous pavement? And when you move that around, when you choose different percentages for different strategies, that's where I think you're going to find differences in those numbers if there are more of them that are, for example, bioswales or porous pavement that has a lot of capacity to hold more water, and then say, for example, a green roof does, then you're probably going to increase the number of gallons quickly with that approach. And so the impact of that is going to be greater. But so it does depend a lot on what the mix that you choose is and what your building mix is. If you have mixed-use area that you're applying this to, you have a lot more opportunities to choose different kinds of green infrastructure. If all you're talking about is a lot of streetscapes, but you're not really going to be dealing with buildings at all, then you're limited to the kind of green infrastructure practices you can use. But then it will also dictate the kind, and also the specifications for your practices. Are you going to build your bioswale with a 2-foot excavation or a 6-foot excavation? And all those things matter, so that when somebody goes through these numbers, using our valuation guide, it won't be possible for you to say, oh, let me just go look at the guide and I'll figure out how much money I'm going to save, because there are some numbers in there that are standard or average or hypothetical. You really have to take your local situation and say, what are we planning to do? What are our factors? What are the specifications for the kind of green infrastructure we intend to put in? And apply that to these equations. And only until you do that will you be able to have a really, an accurate way of using the guide. I hate to, it takes an investment to do this. It's not something that's really just on the shelf for you to look at and go, oh, I can just go make that argument without doing any calculations myself, because there are all these averages in here. That would be, probably not the best approach to take, because it doesn't really tell you about your situation as well as you might want.
Can you share if the tool online has values from 2006, or has it been updated to today's values?
The guide, the 2006 was the calculator. The valuation guide is much later. I think it was probably 2000. I want to say it's 2011 was when it was published. Now, having said that, many of the equations were taken from something that came before that. Otherwise, we couldn't have included them. So it was probably, within a few years before 2011, when the individual studies on air pollution sequestration and those kind of things were put together. Now, some of them may not have changed at all, so that may not be a problem. But I think we're talking sometime, just before 2011 that the numbers came from.
In the case study for Lancaster, do you have the amount that it would cost to achieve that reduction?
The amount that it would cost to install the green infrastructure that we chose? Yeah. No, I don't. I can find out if that number exists. But that would go back to the first question. It would be similar to the first question. It would be like, okay, you just said you're going to put all this stuff in. You gave me your, the benefit number. What was the cost number? And that's not, since we didn't do that because it wasn't part of the guide. It may exist, maybe something Lancaster has, but it wasn't put in the study because it wasn't part of it.
And is the Lancaster case study available on your website or with the government there?
No, unfortunately, it's not published yet.
Okay.
Here, let me just take there. See, I don't know if you can see that still, but EPA is reviewing it and finalizing it, and I just have enough permission to show you some examples from it, but it doesn't exist even for me to get officially. So, but I imagine that's a matter of months before that'll be available. And it would be wonderful if somebody else wanted to try to do even a smaller version of this, so that we could start showing some, more robust. The data set would be bigger, and that would be more valuable to people from all over the country. So that would be great if anybody's interested.
A question came in about this green roof in Chicago, and if there was any change in bird population, was that accounted for?
Huh. I've never heard that before. I don't know the answer. But please email me or tell me if you want me to follow up and find that out. I don't know.
And that looks like we've hit most of the questions right now, and maybe we'll be able to add some in email if additional ones come in.
Okay.
Justin, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I think that's it. Actually, someone just asked what your email is. If you want to show your last slide again,
Right,
that'd be great.
right. Okay, do that. There you go.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for attending today. I do want to say that we are going to have a follow-up webinar on October 31st on CNT's Green Infrastructure Portfolio Standard. Hal, do you want to give a little teaser of that?
Sure, absolutely. For those of you that may not have heard about the portfolio standard, what it is it's starting with the idea that we have many areas are beginning to have ordinances and rules to encourage or require the use of green infrastructure by developers. So when somebody comes along and needs a permit and you give them your permit, but you say, oh, by the way, you have to follow these rules, you have to do so much retention or detention, and that's all good because as we go forward, we want to make sure that we don't make the problem worse. We have more improved ways of dealing with stormwater management. But for all that space out there in your urban areas that is already built and that no one is actually coming in to redevelop or develop, we need a way to try and minimize or reduce the amount of stormwater runoff from those areas. And the portfolio standard is a sort of a methodology for cost-effectively going back in and retrofitting already developed areas in a way that it's over a long period of time and it's incremental, but it's a very sort of systematic way of doing that. That is could very well be the best way with tight budgets to scale up green infrastructure and resolve some of your existing stormwater management problems, CSO problems or SSO problems or basement flooding or water quality without having to come in and build a deep tunnel for X billions of dollars. So that's the scoop.
Justin, you're muted.
Is he trying to talk?
I was trying to talk, yes. Thank you, Danny. Yeah, so I'm putting together a flyer for that, so I'll put together that information and send it out pretty soon. I think that's it for today. I will put the post for the recording of the webinar on our YouTube channel. I'll send out the link for that. And then I'll work with Hal to get his PowerPoint so people can take a look at that as well. So Danny, thank you for helping out with the questions. And Hal, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today about what CNT is doing.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.